What's up, spooky babes? Welcome back to Samantha Haunt. I'm Samantha, and today we're haunting The Weekend because everybody knows The Weekend is for watching horror movies. But if you're anything like me, you kind of want to watch everything. Unfortunately, there's usually only 2 days in the weekend, and you usually have to use some of that time to do all of the things you couldn't do during the week because you were at work or school. Cleaning, chores, errands, having a little bit of a social life if you're lucky, and then cramming all of your creative pursuits into the remaining 3 hours. If I keep on that topic for too long, then we're veering dangerously into the territory where I start ranting about how the 5-day work week is ridiculous and should be abolished. So rather than focusing on the real life horrors, let's get back to the horror movies. I want to talk about what I think you should watch this weekend. If you are paralyzed by being overloaded with choices, let's narrow it down from everything in the entire world to just a few movies I think are totally worth your time. I've got a few that recently dropped, but also one that's been out and I think just didn't get enough attention. So let's start with that one. He said he wants to be in the video, so I had to move him over a little bit. My first recommendation is 2024's Stream. This movie starts out being about a family, mom, dad, brother, and sister, and things are a little tense at home. The daughter of the family has been getting into some trouble recently. She's been caught partying, drinking, she's getting brought home by the cops, and everybody's fighting about it, so things have been really tense at home. Mom and dad get together and they decide, you know what would really help with this? A family trip. Let's lock everybody in a car together where they can't get away from each other, and then we'll all share a hotel room where we also can't get away from each other. What could possibly be a better solution when tensions are already so high? So they take off for their little getaway at this sort of quaint inn. Apparently it's someplace where they used to go when the kids were little, so it's got a lot of fond memories. And they think maybe this will bring the happiness back to their family. But unfortunately, there's no happiness to be found here. They're only in for horror because they're about to become victims in a deranged online game being played by a bunch of masked killers. The concept of this is really interesting because the entire process is being streamed online for live viewers who are also betting on this game. Do you remember the movie Nerve? It was based on the book of the same title. It's a lot like that, except instead of dares, it's death. When this kicks off, this kicks way off. There's a big cast, the action is non-stop, victims are running from and trying to escape players of the game, and things just get crazier and crazier. Speaking of the big cast, I was actually astounded by the cast in this movie. If you had been sitting next to me when I was watching this, you probably would have been so annoyed with me because as names were popping up in the credits, I was just yelling them out in shock. I was like, she's in this? He's in this? So to start with, this stars one of the Scream Queens of all Scream Queens, one of the queens of the Scream Queens, Danielle Harris, who you definitely recognize. You might recognize her from her child acting in Halloween 4 or her adult acting in Rob Zombie's Halloween 1 and 2. You might also recognize her from Urban Legend, See No Evil, or any of the dozens of horror movies she did in between. Or maybe if you're a millennial, you recognize her from the Disney Channel movie Wish Upon a Star, where she switched bodies with her sister, Katherine Heigl, in which she actually ironically kind of wears the same outfit she wore in Urban Legend. In this movie, she's playing the mom. The mom. Danielle Harris, the queen of Scream Queens, is now playing a horror movie mom. This is worse than that time when Ryan Phillippe played the horror movie dad. Just put me in the nursing home. She clearly still retains a lot of her Scream Queen talents and final girl instincts because when the masked killers come for her, she puts up a hell of a fight in what I think is one of the most fun scenes of the movie. But she isn't even the only major star in this. This movie also stars Jeffrey Combs, most notably probably from Reanimator fame, but you definitely recognize him from a lot of things too. And also horror icon Tony Todd. This was actually the second to last movie he filmed before he did Final Destination Bloodlines. I was shocked and delighted to see him appear. Speaking of icons, you'll also get a surprise visit from Tim Curry. See what I mean? The cast in this is absolutely stacked. I couldn't believe all the icons that kept popping up. This movie was so much fun. It was a really fun watch, not just because the cast was amazing, but because the concept was so much fun. I had a favorite victim I was rooting for, obviously Danielle Harris. And I also had a favorite player who I was rooting for. Player 3, but I like to think of her as the yellow player because she was very themed. Yellow top, yellow ribbons in her hair, yellow nails, she had yellow body paint. I love a good themed outfit even when you are a deranged killer. She wasn't just cute, she was also totally sadistic. At one point, she plays tic-tac-toe on a guy. Why do I think you should watch this movie? Because it was fun, it has an amazing cast, and I really think this was severely underhyped because it just did not get enough advertising. I mean, why did I hear nonstop nonsense about Night Swim in 2024 and barely a peep about this? I haven't seen too many of my fellow horror fiends talking about this one, which makes me afraid you haven't seen it. You should definitely check out Stream this week. It is currently available on Tubi, which is of course one of my favorite streaming platforms because it's completely free. And if you're looking for more ideas for what to watch on Tubi, make sure to check out my Tubi Rec of the Week in my shorts or over on my Instagram, which is also Samantha Haunts. I put one out every week, so if you're ever not sure what to watch on Tubi, because their catalog is so big, check it out. For my next recommendation, I actually brought props, because my next recommendation is 2025's Whistle, the movie about a group of friends who finds an Aztec death whistle, blows on it, and summons their own death. Theirs looks a lot more like this. Whistle was just added to the horror streaming app Shudder on May 8th, which is great because now more people can watch it. And I'm afraid that this is another movie that may not have gotten the attention it deserved. I've seen this movie getting some hate on the internet, and listen, I am done with that kind of negativity. Give Whistle the due it deserves. As mentioned, this is a movie about a group of friends who finds an Aztec death whistle. Technically, it's only one friend in the group. She's new to the school, and she gets a new locker that previously belonged to another student who had possession of the whistle. So when she opens up the locker and finds it, she has no idea what it is or what she's getting herself into. She and some of her friends and classmates get into a little bit of an altercation in the hallways, and they all end up in detention together. And of course, she brings with her death whistle. When she opens up her bag and it comes rolling out, obviously it's the talk of detention. Her teacher explains to them a little bit about what it is, but there's some writing on the whistle that they don't quite understand. So they use AI or Google Translate or something to translate it, and they think it says that if you blow on it, it summons the dead. They think that they can use it to summon a ghost. But it turns out what it actually says is if you blow on it, it summons your death. I love it. I actually really loved the way that they set up the backstory for this. You know, every cursed object movie has to have lore behind the cursed object, and I really enjoyed the way that they set up the lore for this one. It was so cool. I really liked it. It's probably my favorite thing about the movie. They end up going to an expert who explains to them that they have called death to them. She says that essentially, when you are born, so is your death. This is your fate, and however you were meant to die is how you were meant to die. And whenever you were meant to die, that's how long it takes for death to find you. So if you were meant to die when you're 80 years old, it'll take 80 years for death to find you. But if you blow on the whistle, death will find you faster because you just told her where you were. Yes, they also personify death in this movie as female. The expert who's giving them this information uses she, her pronouns, which I really enjoyed because I think death usually gets personified as a man. And let's be serious, right? So essentially, you're not changing your fate, you're just speeding it up. This makes for some really unique and sometimes gruesome death scenes that are totally incongruous with what's actually going on around them, so it's really, really fun. The very unique kill scenes and the concept of death kind of hunting them makes for a very Final Destination vibe to this movie, which makes sense because it was worked on by some of the same people who made Final Destination. If you know me, you know I love the Final Destination movies, so this totally worked for me. I've seen a lot of people online saying that they didn't really enjoy this one, they thought it was cheesy or campy, and I'm kind of like, since when is that a bad thing? It has a little bit of the same campy vibe that Final Destination movies have. So again, if you like Final Destination, you will like Whistle. It's very much a teen horror type movie. It's one of my favorite niches of horror. Also into the teen horror trope, Whistle is definitely for you. And of course, you know me, I want to talk a little bit about the cast of this movie and who you'll recognize. If you're a fan of Yellow Jackets, you'll recognize Sophie Nélisse, who plays young Shauna in Yellow Jackets, and she's one of the friend group in this. And actually, this was the first time I ever saw her with her real blue eyes. I didn't realize she was wearing brown contacts in order to play young Shauna so she would match Melanie Lynskey. Remarkably, it kind of changes her entire face. If you're a fan of the Cornetto trilogy, you might also recognize Nick Frost, who plays the teacher who puts them all in detention and then ends up embroiled in their death whistle shenanigans because he's trying to help them translate what it says, and he's very interested in this artifact, possibly for selfish reasons. His interest leads him to blow on the whistle, and death comes for him too. His death scene is kind of what I would call the inaugural death scene in a horror movie. It's not the opening scene death. You get your opening scene death that sort of sets things up for you, and then you cut to the main cast. But then when you get your inaugural death scene, that's when sort of the main cast starts getting picked off. So Nick Frost is a little bit of the inaugural death scene. Obviously, he's not one of the friend group, but he is closely tied to them. And his death scene is probably one of my favorites in the movie because he dies the way he was meant to, and it's really spooky and creepy, and definitely has the medical examiners totally baffled. You'll also recognize the guy who plays Xavier from Wednesday, and he plays a total creep in this movie. I highly recommend this. It has a very high rewatch value. I've already rewatched it a couple of times, and I think that you will too. And honestly, they sort of left it open-ended at the end so that they could do a sequel if they were able to, and unpopular opinion, I hope they do because I would watch that in a heartbeat. What's the worst that could happen, right? Okay, my next recommendation for what to watch this weekend is Dust Bunny. This is a really unique horror movie with a heaping help of humor that I think you're really going to like. I was really looking forward to this one ever since I saw it in Fangoria magazine, and it just looked like it was really different and outside the box, and that might be my favorite thing about this. I know a lot of horror movie fans are looking for something that's a little bit unconventional, and if that's you, Dust Bunny is the perfect weekend pick. Dust Bunny is about a little girl who, like many little girls, thinks there's a monster living under her bed. Except, unlike the other little girls, this one might be right. But when the monster comes for her foster parents, she decides it's time to take matters into her own hands, and she knows the perfect person to help because it turns out her neighbor is a hitman and she knows it. She comes up with a very offbeat plan to get some money together so that she can try to hire him. And just as a side note, the scene where she gets the money is probably one of my favorite scenes in the entire movie. First of all, it's hilarious. Second of all, the way it's filmed is so good. I don't want to spoil anything, but when you see it, you'll see what I mean. Everything about that scene, from the setting to the colors to the music to the way it's filmed and the way she's dressed, is just so good. It works perfectly together and it makes me laugh every time. I had to rewind it to watch it again because I enjoyed it so much. So she gets her money together and she takes it to her neighbor, who, by the way, is only credited as the intriguing neighbor for the entire movie, and she tries to hire his services to take out this monster under her bed. Obviously, he is a little bit skeptical. He doesn't think there's really a monster. He thinks her parents caught strays from criminals who were actually looking for him in the next apartment over. They just got the wrong place. So between that and this little girl now living alone and pretty much putting herself in front of him all the time, begging him for help, he kind of feels a little bit responsible, and possibly against his better judgment, he does get involved. And from there, things just get crazier and crazier. There's monsters, there's hitmen, there's Sigourney Weaver, who, by the way, was hysterical in this. There's a part where the intriguing neighbor is meeting with her at a restaurant. She orders a sandwich, and she's kind of like unhinging her jaw and explains to him that she has to do it because she clenches her jaw so much that she has to make sure she can open it wide enough to eat the sandwich. So irreverent and funny, and honestly a little bit too relatable. Incredibly fun movie for a lot of reasons, including that the intriguing neighbor, who's played by Mads Mikkelsen, and the little girl Aurora make a really fun odd couple pairing. She's very smart, very precocious, and he does not mince words with her. He treats her like she's very smart. There's a very funny scene where he's disposing of a body and she asks him what he's doing, and he's just honest with her and straight up tells her exactly how the process is going to work. In addition to how much fun this movie is, it also looks so cool. The apartment building that Aurora and the intriguing neighbor live in is gorgeous. It's all these rich jewel tones and Art Nouveau architecture and decor. Every wallpaper has an ornate pattern on it, and frankly, the place looks huge. I can't even imagine how much a real apartment of this size that looks this cool would cost in New York City, where this movie is set. It's really fun to look at, and it creates such an amazing setting for this movie, and it suits the movie so well, especially because it is a little offbeat. It's one of those settings that doesn't just function as a setting, it also becomes kind of a background character in the movie because it lends so much to it. It's not just there to house the story, it's also a part of the story, and it does get worked into the plot sometimes when the action picks up and they're starting to do things and fight for their lives. Everything's very bright, colorful, rich, fun to look at. Even Aurora's outfits are really colorful and kind of eclectic. Also, in terms of visuals, the monster design is really fun. I really enjoyed how they brought the monster to life and made it look exactly how a little kid envisioning a monster under their bed would look. They sort of combined a childhood knowledge of animals along with childhood fears and maybe their plushies to manifest Aurora's monster under the bed perfectly. I really encourage you to check this one out. Don't poo-poo it at the concept of monster under the bed because it's so much more than that. It takes a childhood fear and really expands upon it and turns it into its own unique horror movie that I really enjoyed. I think you'll like it a lot, and this is currently available to stream on HBO Max. Okay, my final recommendation for what you should watch this weekend is Pretty Lethal, or as I like to think of it, the Killer Ballerina movie. This one may have been a little bit disadvantaged by its platform. I kind of imagine that if this had been a Netflix original or maybe was on Shudder, it would have gotten a lot more attention, and I think it deserves it. This is another one that's really fun and very unique. This follows a group of young ballerinas who are traveling to Europe for a very important dance competition. On the way there, their bus breaks down, leaving them stranded in a very remote area. So already a complete nightmare. But they decide to try to walk to the nearest location and see if they can get in out of the cold and rain and maybe get some help. So they make their way to this nearby inn, and it's very lavish. There's a bar, there's a stage, and there's a bunch of people inside, so they think maybe this is their saving grace. It is not. Even though these people take them in and technically give them warm, dry clothes, they are not a friendly group of people. They are actually a group of ruthless criminals, and they do not intend to let these ballerinas leave here alive. The girls are obviously terrified, but they know that the only way they're going to get out of here is if they fight for it. Now, as you may already know, unless you're like Timothée Chalamet or something, ballerinas are actually super strong and super tough. So despite having no weapons and no backup, the ballerinas in this movie decide to use what they do have: their strength, their dance background, and their ability to work together as a team. Prior to this, they'd been having a little bit of tension, conflict, and butting heads, but they decide they have to put all that aside in order to save their own lives. It is so triumphant and fun watching these ballerinas fight their way out, work as a group, and show these criminals what they're really made of. It all culminates in a big fight scene in the bar that's very choreographed and set to music. It's a little bloody. They use some very unique things as weapons in some very unique ways, and they anticipate each other's movements in a way that only a group of dancers who has been together for a long time would be able to, in order to get the better of men who are 3 or 4 times their size. It's a bit campy, but also impressive, bloody, and super fun. This is more of a horror thriller, action horror type movie, but it's also very funny. It has a sort of self-aware humor that I really liked, and it made it even more enjoyable. This features a cast of young stars that you've definitely seen in something before, or at the very least, you recognize their names. I think a lot of the people in this cast are really making a name for themselves in the movie business, and I think at least one of them is going to become a total scream queen. First off, you've got Maddie Ziegler, who you may recognize as the very ambitious little girl from Dance Moms. Or maybe you recognize her from Sia's music videos. But she's grown up now and working in show business, and she plays Bonnie in this. Her friends refer to her as Bones, and she's sort of the rebel of the group. You can tell by her earrings. She's kind of a little bit of the outcast because she doesn't have as much money as some of the other girls in the group. If you don't already know, ballet can be a really expensive sport, but she's also a dancing lead in their performance, and she has a little bit of a natural leader type personality that really comes in handy for them once they find themselves in this predicament. Her main rivalry is with her fellow dancer named Princess, played by Lana Condor, who you might recognize as Lara Jean from the Netflix adaptation of the YA book To All the Boys I've Loved Before. And you will definitely recognize this young lady, Millicent Simmons, if you're a horror fan, because she starred in A Quiet Place 1 and 2 as the daughter of the family. If you don't know, Millicent Simmons is deaf in real life, and she plays a deaf dancer in the movie, which I thought was really interesting. The filmmakers did do a lot of research on deaf dancers and tried to bring her perspective to life. There are some moments where it cuts to her perspective and the sound cuts out, so you can see how she's perceiving it and how she is perceiving the cues from her fellow dancers and the things that are happening around her in order to fight her way out of here. Along with her sister, who is played by Judd Apatow's youngest daughter, Iris Apatow. She has really grown up a lot since the last time I saw her, which I think was in This Is 40. And finally, they are joined by Avantika, who is no stranger to horror because she also starred in the 2024 horror film Tarot, which I really liked, and it was another one of those teen horror movies that I thought was really underrated and actually kind of reminds me of Whistle in some ways. I really think you should keep an eye out for some of these girls. I think some of them are coming for the scene and they're going to become total scream queens, especially Millicent Simmons, who kind of already is a scream queen. And in my opinion, Avantika is well on her way. Also, outside of the cast of young ballerinas, Uma Thurman is also in this movie. She actually plays the head of the criminals in this movie, and she's very convincing, a little chilling at times even. All right, spooky babes, those are my 4 recommendations for what to watch this weekend. I hope this helped you narrow it down a little bit, and I hope you find a new favorite here. If you do watch any of these, or you already have, make sure to let me know what you think in the comments. Don't forget to haunt the like button, and if you got anything out of this, subscribe so that we can haunt more things together in the future. Thank you so much for being here. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you in the next one.